There it is again. 37 feet below. It's right below us. I shouted over the hum of the engine. The white and green 26-foot bayliner, lovingly dubbed the Carmanos, slowed as I brought the boat to a crawl. Dark waves lazily slapped against the dull-aged hull. The sun vainly tried to pierce the overcast sky, causing the waters of Fall Lake to appear a murky brown with a large summer storm creeping in upon me. Thunder had not yet begun to announce the arrival of the storm, but the sheer black wall of encroaching clouds was foreboding. It was my third year on the job serving as an assistant park ranger, with duties mainly consisting of cleaning up after campers and rescuing lost bicyclists on the trails after sundown. This was my first real charge that was anything but mundane. I worked with Jeffrey, a ranger on staff. We were quite the opposite but got along very well together. Jeffrey was old enough to be my father, and he was one of the longest tenured rangers at Falls Lake. He was overweight, and always sported a Captain Picard haircut. He often walked with a limp. He was a former football player, but time and injuries had taken a toll on him over the years. He wore the duty belt daily, causing more wear on his aging hips and lower back. His dry humor and pessimistic view of the world contrasted with his youthful exuberance. Jeffrey was technically my superior, but let me drive the boat when no one was around. There was a small crack in his otherwise gruff demeanor. Over the years he had warmed to me, and I began thinking of him as family. My senior project was coordinated through a local university to map the winding bed falls of Falls Lake, for the first time since its creation in 1978. The hours would finish up my degree. It was my first day back since last fall, and I was anxious to get to work. We began the day near Rolling View Park, one of the largest parks on the lake. We were 6 hours into the day and we were making a lot of progress. We discovered and noted the positions of downed trees and logs by the hundreds, massive graveyards of semi-calcified stumps, large rock formations, and unusual dips and drop-offs, possibly caused by demolitions before the lake was created. One of the more interesting things discovered was the farm equipment. Old plows and small tractors were left behind by farmers who couldn't or wouldn't move them before the Army Corps of Engineers took their land and livelihood via eminent domain for the lake. It was nearly the end of the day. The sun began its journey towards the tree lines which surrounded the lake, when we located an unusual, roughly rectangular-shaped object, 12 meters below the surface. After several passes, we determined the object to be approximately 15 feet in length and sitting directly on the bottom. Jeffrey, grizzled from years of working the area, slumped down into his chair and hung his head, his mood constantly just one notch above tetchy, devolved into downright exasperated anger. "We are going to be here a while, damn it." And I left my sandwich at the marina. My head snapped up, an inquisitive look on my face after such an unusual outburst. "What? Why?" "People always disappear on this lake. It's happened ever since they built this place. People drown, or they get drunk and fall off their boat, or they jump off the Highway 50 bridge. There was this one lady, she tied bricks to her feet and popped off a bunch of prescription meds one time. Sad soul. Look at that shape on the screen there. That's a car, my boy." I stared blankly at the various screens in front of me for a minute. The relatively new screens and instruments were haphazardly retrofitted into the center consoles of the 90s era boat. I was not nearly educated enough on sonar equipment to make the same conclusion as Jeffrey did. "Bring us around, kid. I'll call in the diver. We only have about 30 minutes before the rain comes." Jeffrey picked up the radio. 462, this is 467. I think we found a car out here. Can you call the sheriffs? We're gonna need their dive team. Jeffrey stowed the radio and turned to me as I powered the twin Mercury engines down completely. He let out a droll laugh and said, This is not how I wanted to end my day. His gravelly voice echoed across the lake. Carried by the water in open space, he opened a pack of Marvick unfiltered cigarettes and lit one, taking a long drag. I'm glad you came along this year, kid. You're better than that other little miscreant we had. They let him go. What was his name? Those things are gonna kill you, you know. And if you fall out, I'm not gonna kiss you. Jeffrey grunted but said nothing. He took another long drag and a thick cloud of smoke was carried by the wind into my face. Sean! I said as I rolled my eyes and coughed. His name was Sean Temple. He was from NC State too. I was wondering why he didn't come back. He nearly sunk the Carmanos. Greg lost his mind over it. Thought he was gonna burst that blood vessel in his forehead. The one that pops right here when he gets ornery. Jeffrey tapped the center of his forehead just above the eyes. Complete mess. I burst into a fit of laughter. How did that happen? That kid didn't put the plug in the back before they launched. Fancy college education can't make up for a lack of common sense, sometimes. No offense, ISH. Jeffrey chuckled and dismissively waved a hand in my direction, sprinkling ash onto the deck. You're alright, though. Greg is in charge now, right? That's right, Jeffrey replied while blowing 2 streams of smoke from his nostrils. He flicked more ash over the side and put the cigarette out. Never a litter bug. Jeffrey put the butt into a small bag near the cockpit. Superintendent Greg Urquhart. Bully for him. He worked his ass off to get it. He's the head ranger in charge now. Besides you, he's about the only other person around here I can still stand. The late June air hung thick over us, causing my gray park staff polo to stick to my skin along my chest and back. Having lived here all my life, I was used to the heat. I glanced at the dashboard. 97 degrees Fahrenheit and 80% humidity. Not as bad as it had been earlier in the week. A light breeze picked up, gently rocking the Carmanos, her old bones creaking, causing us to lazily drift in the channel. My hair tossed briefly as the gust died, providing momentary relief from the oppression. I took a swig from my jug of water and snacked on a pack of peanut butter crackers while I listened to the birds. After about 30 minutes, I heard it. A low hum echoed from far away but moved closer. I glanced over my shoulders and Alabaster Sea Hunter speedboat streaked towards the inlet. Brand new and state-of-the-art, the speedboat was a class above our old dinghy in technology and design. Wake County Sheriff was stickered in gold and white on the side in massive letters, with Marine Unit just along the bow. A deputy in scuba gear sat near the railing. She situated a mask and checked her regulator. The Sea Hunter moved into position next to us, and the deputy at the console called over as he slowed to an idle. This the spot? Yes, just over our bow. I chimed up. Jeffrey snorted and rolled his eyes at me. Bow, really? Bow? Just say the front of the boat, kid. I'm being proper, Jeff. You should try it. I laughed a little as he cut his eyes at me. He hated being called Jeff. The diver rolled over the side with a splash into the brown water. I studied the bank of the lake, barely 30 feet to our stem. There was a steep drop-off from the shoreline to where we floated. It appeared to have been a place the corpse demoed to make room for the bridge pylons, some 50 yards further out. Light traffic passed by on the bridge. Rush hour traffic long gone. I stared off at the scrub brush on the hillside leading down from the bridge. There was a small gravel spot where cars could turn around or pull over. The plant life there was flattened in a straight line coming off the roadway and directly towards the shoreline. In the law enforcement world, this is what we call a clue. Greg would say. Regular Sherlock, that one. A burst of bubbles broke me from my trance. The diver surfaced and turned, spitting her regulator from her mouth. Marcus, it's a Jeep. she shouted to the deputy on board the Sea Hunter. He turned to face her, and she continued, "There's a body in it. What's left of one, anyway. Been there a little while." The deputy Marcus removed his hat and adjusted the cap which covered the waves in his hair. He nodded to her with a concerned look on his face and began speaking into the radio. He looked young. Maybe he was new. A bolt of lightning cracked the sky open. The first raindrop fell a few seconds later. "Damn it," I said to myself. "Looks like I will be getting wet." It was 9:50 in the evening when the wrecker finally hoisted a Jeep Grand Cherokee from the choppy murk. The red paint was badly weathered, and every window was smashed out. A massive dent from an impact had caved in the passenger side door. The front grille was battered, and the left headlamp was missing. I clutched at the edges of my raincoat as the downpour continued. The Jeep was hauled up to the roadway, to the waiting forensics unit to photograph the occupant. As the Jeep was dragged up the hill from whence it had come, I noticed something odd. The bumper of the Jeep was bent and twisted into a mangled shape. A tree limb was lodged through the back window. It was almost as if someone had driven the Jeep down the hill into the water, backwards. The driver was in worse shape than the Jeep. His clothes were tattered, and it appeared fish had begun to devour him. His left arm was missing just above the elbow. Jeffrey visibly winced as a gust of wind blew the scent of pond scum and putrefaction towards us. I tapped my G-Shock, causing the backlight to activate. 10:47 p.m. Lot of comp time for this one. We had begun to slowly back towards the Rolling View Marina. Our trip was hampered by the downpour. Eventually the rain settled down to a drizzle. A thick fog bank formed from the intense temperature drop. This left our visibility near zero. Jeffrey kept us in the channel, the deepest part of the lake, for safety. The channel was the last remnant of the Nueces River before the dam transformed the area into what it is today. It grumbled at the pace, but dared not to speed up beyond 3 miles per hour. The massive 20,000 lumen searchlight barely penetrated the fog, which enveloped us, and we were forced to navigate using the GPS built into the console. The cockpit was covered by a hardtop, but the wind blew the rain into us from the side. I was utterly drenched from head to toe. The raincoat did little to help me at this point, but it helped to fight the sudden cold snap caused by the storm. I felt a distinct squish in my shoes as I shifted my weight from each small bump as the Carmanos dragged herself home. Jeffrey glanced at the sonar screen and furrowed his brow. A tall, slender line spiked upwards, denoting a hit against an object. Jeffrey said nothing. Not that I could have heard him all that well anyway. The twin Mercury engines were old, and they ran at an extremely high pitch at low speeds. The intense whine left conversation difficult unless you shouted. He did not seem to be in the mood for questions, and I was not exactly in the mood to ask them. I just wanted to go home. The screen of the Hummingbird sonar was set to night mode, and the green glow washed over my face as I stared intently at the screen. 2 pings in the last 20 seconds. They barely registered at all unless we had the mapping equipment on. Perhaps we were detecting logs, which had been washed into the lake by the storm. In such low visibility, they could be very hazardous to the boat. The Carmanos was nearly as old as I was, and she wasn't exactly in the best of shape. Jeffrey was seasoned and experienced on the lake, though, and I settled back into my chair to relax a bit as he steered us home. The boat rocked hard on his side as we struck something underwater. Jeffrey swore loudly. The back end of the Carmanos swung around almost 90 degrees. He cut the engines to stop them from taking damage if we had run into a fallen tree. Suddenly, devoid of the mechanical sound of human technology, and I was aware of the airiness of the night, it swept over me for the first time and stood out as unusual. Normally at this time of night, the lake was alive with the sounds of insects, frogs, and other assorted nocturnal animals. But tonight, there was nothing. The dense blanket of fog was borderline preternatural. The soft pitter-patter of the rain against the surface of the lake was broken up only by the dull slapping of small breaks of water against the faded green paint of the hull. I began to think about our current situation, and I realized how dangerous it was. No one could see us. No one could find us if we needed assistance. What if the boat were damaged from the impact with the tree and began to sink? I was an excellent swimmer, but Jeffrey, his smoking had rendered his cardiovascular endurance something to be desired. His massive frame carried excess weight in his gut, causing a paunch to hang over his belt. Could he keep up if we had to swim? Would I be able to drag him to shore if he got injured? The Hummingbird showed the nearest shoreline to be 580 feet to our left. Water depth 15 feet. The Carmanos was a small cartoonish emblem of a boat on the surface of the water. We were in the shallows. Before the dam was built, this entire area was made up of fields with row upon row of tobacco and corn. The falls of Noosa's River would have been to the right of the shallows, with rolling hills leading up to about 30 feet above those fields. Those hills were now a shoreline for a massive park, giving it the name Rolling View. The fields were now 15 to 20 feet underwater in a vast open expanse of lake known as the Shallows. The park itself consisted of a massive peninsula jutting out into the lake. A white sandy beach covered one side, with kayak launch and restroom building roughly 300 feet back from the shore. A large parking lot with street lamps separated the beach from the rest of the park. This contained hundreds of acres of hiking trails and campsites. Massive rock outcroppings dotted the shore as well, giving the area a serene appearance when it wasn't under a deluge and wrapped in inescapable fog. On the other side of those hundreds of acres of forest was Blackwater Cove. I squinted at the screen, now soaked with water droplets. It obscured my view and made the details of the map difficult to make out. I could make out that we were at the tip of the peninsula, and had moved just beyond the Blackwater Cove. I wiped the screen clear and noticed something unusual. A small red dot was directly next to the icon depicting the boat. Odd. A sound broke the silence. It was a strange one, almost like the snapping of a bullwhip. I couldn't place it. The boat turned slightly, and the starboard side dipped ever so slowly towards the water. It kept dipping and kept dipping. Jeffrey's eyes widened as his mouth opened to say something, but I couldn't hear him. A sudden wave of warmth washed over the left side of my face. It took me several seconds to realize things were moving in slow motion. Time slowed to a crawl as I saw Jeffrey's feet lift off the deck. A soda can slid across the deck. A pen and paper were launched in the air. I saw my entire world tilt to the right. The impact was so powerful, it lifted the Carmanos on her side and threw Jeffrey and I into the water. The rain had cooled the uppermost layer of water considerably. My head broke the surface and I took a deep gasp of air. Everything was illuminated by an otherworldly blue hue. I realized it was a searchlight. It was still on, and burned away the darkness under the water, around the tilting Carmanos in a cool and soothing teal green. Her console was partially submerged as she laid on her side. I kicked over and grabbed the side railing as the boat very slowly rolled back towards buoyancy. I touched the side of my head, wincing immediately. A gash ran near my hairline, the source of the sudden warmth, as blood coated my face in a crimson mask. I reached into my hair and found small chunks of fiberglass. I had been struck by shrapnel from the impact. The left side of the boat was still exposed. I looked over to see the fiberglass hull had shattered into a crater nearly 2 feet in diameter. Cracks crisscrossed the side of the Carmanos, all the way to the railing upon which I now gripped. "What the hell happened?" I said aloud, even though no one was around. I screamed as something grabbed a hold of my right arm. I turned and a burning white light blasted directly into my face. It robbed me of my night vision. After a second and a frantic tug, I felt the familiar cloth of a polo shirt in my grip. Jeffrey's brown eyes shone wide as he clung to me. I helped him towards the rapidly listing boat. He took hold and established a firm grip on the side. The Carmanos was beginning to sink. "How bad are you hurt?" Jeffrey seemed concerned. It burns. I think I might need stitches," I answered. He looked me over and held his gaze for a long while on the cut. Perhaps it was worse than I thought. I made sure he was okay, took a deep breath and dove under. Finding a compartment in the blazing light of the searchlight was simple enough. I pulled 2 life jackets from the side and a first aid kit. I went to the cockpit and attempted to activate the emergency button on the radio, which would broadcast our need to Wake and Durham counties. The radio, however, was dead. It must have been fried by the water. We were on our own. I surfaced and tried to help Jeffrey put his life jacket on. He refused and instead laid across it like a flotation device. "We need to swim. Shore's that way," I said as I pointed to our left. "How far?" he asked me. I saw his flashlight shake in his hand. "Not far. You can do it," I replied, not wanting to tell him it was nearly 6 football fields away. Jeffrey's flashlight died. He tapped it several times, but it wouldn't come back on. The airy teal green was disrupted, and I looked down below us. The searchlight must have flickered. The rain relented as we began our journey, but the wind continued. We moved roughly 10 feet from the Carmanos when the power gave out. Our whole world was cast into complete darkness. The wind continued to push the clouds out as the storm passed. I felt a chill run over me. The fog on the water was dense but broke apart to reveal a choppy surface. Soft pale lights began to penetrate the weakened fog in the distance. I changed my direction slightly and began to swim towards them. A 3/4 moon illuminated the surface, casting an incandescent glow on the breaks in the water. I took a glance back at the Carmanos now 100 yards behind us. She had sunk. Her 26-foot frame sticking partially out of the water at an angle. The engines had buried themselves in the thick sandy bottom. At least she would be easy to locate in the morning. A distant rumble of thunder echoed far away. I could see the rim of Blackwater Cove on the other side of the peninsula as we approached the beach. "I think Greg will fire her ass in the morning," Jeffrey called out. "Why you say that? You actually did sink a boat. You're officially worse than Sean." We both let out a soft laugh, but Jeffrey was more labored than mine. He was tired. I turned my attention to the beach. "I think we're at Rolling View. I can see the parking lot lamps from here," I said to Jeffrey. He didn't answer. I turned back to check on him. He huffed and breathed shallowly as he struggled to pull himself along at my pace. "You okay?" I asked. He grunted but didn't immediately speak. After several long minutes he replied, "What hit us?" That was truly a strange way to phrase the question. I assumed we had hit something, a tree, a stump, but I hadn't considered it the other way around. I continued my breaststroke until my nearly 6-foot frame found squishy sandy purchase. I realized I had lost a shoe. "Jeffrey, I can touch bottom. We are almost there." Jeffrey was still 30 feet behind me. I could barely see him as he trudged closer to the place where I first found my footing. I made my way into knee-deep water and waited for him to close the distance in case he needed help. He approached up to chest deep, then waist deep, then stopped. Hey, what the hell? What is it? I asked. There's something in the water. Jeffrey slapped the water with his palms as he momentarily lost balance, and then steadied himself. He appeared concerned. No, not concerned. He was scared. He looked to his left and then his right. Jeffrey opened his mouth to speak again, but did not get the chance. The water behind him erupted and waves were thrown in all directions. It was as if a bomb had detonated. A shadow of unnatural speed tore through the wall of water and rose behind him, 3 feet over his head. It plunged downward and attached itself to Jeffrey where the neck met the left shoulder. The darkness enveloped nearly all of his chest. His eyes bulged from his head. A gurgling choke emanated from deep within his throat as gouts of blood spurted from his mouth. His arms were frozen, one hand reaching out to me. It trembled, the other hand grasping at the insidious thing which had latched itself onto his body. The black skin was slick and reflected the moonlight with an oily sheen. I was frozen. Fear and horror overwhelmed me. My mind could not comprehend what I saw. 4 nightmarish eyes, orange and reflective in the dark, opened. The eyelids opened at a strange angle. A thick black slit cut through each pupil. They revealed eyes not like a human eye. They were the eyes of something soulless and uncaring. A predator. They seemed to stare directly into me. 2 sets in each side of what I could now make out his long, sturdy head. The place where the nostrils would be bore only a rounded snout. A hideous jawline distended from the skull. I could make out pink fleshy gums tightly wrapped around twin rows of dozens of hooked fangs. Blood pumped steadily from the punctures to Jeffrey's neck and shoulder. Thick lines of crimson shot across the thing's head. A small sliver of his back broke the surface as it coiled around Jeffrey at the waist like a serpent. Much of its true size was still somewhere underwater. There was a sickening snap, and Jeffrey was bent in half. The brutal sound of air being forced out of his lungs resonated as I saw his body fold backwards across the ribcage. One leg flopped uselessly out of the water and bent the wrong way as my friend was ripped off his feet. The lake opened itself and the thing took him. Massive ripples disrupted the peaceful surface. An oily pool floated across the top of the water, rocking back and forth from the disturbance. It slowly drifted towards me and left red stains on my shirt. I backpedaled ashore as fast as humanly possible. I sat on the beach of Rolling View, staring at the calm oasis of water as if for the first time. I sat very still for a long while. I did not move until the light broke the tops of the trees to signal the arrival of dawn. I would like to thank T4 Bullock for the amazing story. And if you want to check out their other stories yourself, as always, there's a link in the description right under this video. There you'll also find links to my Patreon and other links regarding ways to contact and info happening at any given moment. And in closing, all are welcome in the hand of horror, even you.